Assalamu alaikum guys, Sean Strickland just managed to shock the world as the biggest underdog for the second time in his life. So, obviously we all know like how big of an underdog he was. Like, for me personally, my prediction was that it's not even close and it's gonna be as perfect as a performance as it was against GDP, if not better. Like Khamzat's performance against Sean, but honestly, it's hard to believe at this point that Khamzat Chimaev undefeated no more. Like, bro, I mean, as a huge fan of the guy, I'm obviously a bit depressed from all of this, but still, it just makes me happy. Like that, seeing someone like Sean Strickland, he actually managed to beat Khamzat Chimaev. It's really incredible. Like, this is greatness. Like, bro, like at this point you have to like really consider this guy as being one of the all-time greats in the middleweight division, because obviously in between these two fights, the easy fight and the Khamzat fight, he had two brutal losses to Dricus du Plessis, but still, right now, there's no doubt in my mind that he's the best middleweight in the world. Like, obviously, there's a huge factor. There's a problem that we know that DDP beat him twice and could probably beat him 10 times if they fought 10 times, right? That obviously makes some type of dispute that he might just be the second best middleweight in the world. But honestly, after seeing that performance, and obviously we know that and I'm surprised that, because I didn't know this before the fight, or I guess it was my my lack of journalism, but still, I'm surprised that Strickland was actually injured going to the fight, and he had a major ACL surgery. Like he couldn't it was very difficult for his arm like to put it down like this, and that's honestly very shocking, because that obviously limited his abilities in a 25 minutes fight significantly, and it's it just makes it even better, like the win. And obviously he got a split decision win, and the final round was very close. I personally gave it to Khamzat because of my personal style of analyzing and a little bit of bias, I'll admit it. But still, even if it did went to a split decision, still it's it wasn't supposed to be even close. And I know this is the part that people don't get. Most Khamzat Chimaev fans are coping by the excuse that I was also this until I came to my senses, let's just say. And the excuse is that the weight cut. Khamzat, he thought he was going to meet the heavyweight, and now light heavyweight. So now it was very difficult for him to meet the weight. That's why he didn't fight like he usually does. And yeah, I do admit that my apologies. I do admit that Khamzat himself, he didn't look as sharp as he did against Dricus du Plessis, and he probably wasn't 100% of himself. But still, yeah, like I get it that he was limited, but still, just considering the huge favoritism that was going that he was getting, like Khamzat was supposed to show Strickland levels to the game, and that's exactly the reason why I am not any of these types of excuses, the rough weight cut, etc. I'm not even considering this, like, genuinely, because even if the weight cut was rough, first of all, it's Khamzat's own fault. Like you're the former welterweight. You decided to move up to middleweight and stay in middleweight as a champion and not move up to light heavyweight. So it's your responsibility, firstly. And secondly, considering how big of a favorite you are going to the fight, bro, like, just a weight cut, it's nothing, especially considering Sean himself also had a really bad injury just like I think 4 days before the fight. That's also incredible. And I know I feel like I'm sugarcoating Sean Strickland a lot in this video, but it's just the truth. Like what else can I say, bro? Because like, what he did was it was genuine greatness. And a part of me wanted Khamzat to shut Strickland up for good, but after finding out the truth and hearing what he said after the fight, about obviously all of being getting it too far, and obviously saying a lot of BS basically, just to sell the fight, and actually being very respectful to Muslims and Chechens, and all types of races and religions, right? That just like obviously, yeah, I know it's common sense to most MMA fans, but personally, I was really shocked by a lot of the things that he said, but still, honestly, alhamdulillah, it's just great that like people like this actually exist. And he said that moving forward he will definitely try his best to be a better example, which I also really appreciate. But yeah, Sean Strickland, absolute legends. Big ups to the guy, obviously. Wow, what an amazing win, bro. Like, crazy, this guy. But obviously he did it against Israel Adesanya once, and in that fight he was an even bigger underdog. But yeah, in this fight also, beating an undefeated Khamzat Chimaev, who just beat the shit out of Dricus du Plessis, the unbeatable middleweight with whatever style he had, who beat you twice. Amazing, right? Big ups to again. And I know I haven't been uploading for the past 2 days. My apologies for that. But yeah, inshallah, I'm gonna stop anytime soon. This week we've got a lot of good fights. Obviously, Mike Perry versus Nate Diaz, the Francis Ngannou fight. Boxing as well. Filip Hrgovic versus Dave Haaland. Amazing heavyweight clash. And of course we can't forget the Arnold Lennon versus Costa, right? UFC is always UFC. But anyways, that's my take on these guys. You guys make sure to let me know what you guys think, and inshallah I'll see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.